What is going on, folks? I want to welcome you from half court for today, a monumentous episode of the podcast because Troy, for the first time in 17 years, 6,174 days, which puts it at just under 17 years. But you know what I mean? The Pistons have won a playoff game. I am Sean Murphy, credential Pistons reporter, alongside my man, Marquette's movement shooter, the legend, Troy Sergey. Troy, how are you doing today? It is a great day to root for the Detroit Pistons.
How am I doing? I'm doing great. You're absolutely right. The Detroit Pistons were able to win their first playoff game in almost 17 years. And man, I do remember that last game. It was a Sunday night, game 5 against the Celtics. I was definitely a fan, but I was not the die-hard fan yet. Antonio McDyess had a good game. I know that was also the block that Jason Maxiel had on Kevin Garnett. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look up that block. But last night was awesome, Sean. Cade Cunningham is the real deal. Dennis Schroeder hit a clutch shot there at the end with 1 minute left, tie ball game. And it just feels good that we were able to put the last 16 and a half, almost 17 years behind us. Sean, I think last podcast we said all we need from this Detroit Pistons team for this first round against the Knicks is really just to win a game. Right? Once we win a game, we're able to, I think, understand that we're playing with house money. And I think that's even what you tweeted last night of, hey, now we're playing with house money. Is this series winnable? Of course it is. But the Pistons are still going to have to be on their A game. And winning 3 games is going to still be a tough challenge against the New York Knicks team. So as fun as last night was, I think we, as fans, the Pistons team, the organization, the coaching staff, time to get to work and have all eyes on Game 3.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think if you're the Pistons, you have to feel really good about the level of play that you've put together. And if it wasn't for that 21-0 run in the fourth quarter in game 1, the Pistons would be heading back to Detroit up 2-0. We'd be
Mm-hmm.
talking about the Pistons, being the overwhelmingly the better team in this series. Obviously, there were moments where Jalen Brunson has looked absolutely fantastic. There have been moments where he's been really infuriating and getting to the line like no tomorrow. But he's also been really dang good because he's Jalen Brunson. But I think, for the Pistons, it's like not only for this young locker room, is this just shaking the boogeyman of getting your first playoff win out of the way, which is a great thing for a young team because it gives you the confidence that you can do it and that you know what it takes to win a playoff game, what all has to go into it. So now you can head into the series with that confidence. And by the way, now you're going back home. You don't have to play in that hostile environment for the next 2 games. Yeah, that hostile environment is hostile for you now, not hostile against you. So the other thing as well is like beyond that, not only is this just big for, like just big for the players, but like you said, this is massive for the organization and this is massive for the franchise. I mean, Troy, we're talking almost 2 decades of not even a playoff win, which doesn't just mean that your team wasn't good enough to really make it to the postseason most times. They weren't even good enough to even give the hope that they were there for a reason, right? Or that there was something beyond that series to look forward to or to build upon. We've talked before about, the exciting runs in 2016 or 2015 and then 2019 with the Blake Griffin year, right? Like we've talked about, what those runs have meant, but those runs ultimately are not going to be remembered in the history of the NBA. You really only remember those series if you're a hardcore fan. And they only stand out because it's been so few and far between. So to
Right.
not only get back to the playoffs with this young core that you built from the ground up, you didn't take any of the shortcuts. You took the absolute long, treacherous route coming off of your most painful seasons in franchise history to turn around and to not only make it to the playoffs, but to win a playoff game against a 50-win New York Knicks team that was built to win a championship is something that absolutely cements this season as a massive success. And now it's a sign that this is a new era in Pistons basketball. This is legitimately a new day in Pistons basketball because now that era is gone. That era is dead. That streak is over. So now they can move forward and focus on the future and like just ultimately build upon this because this is something that has legs to it. This is something that deserves to be recognized because that doesn't just happen overnight, Troy. I mean, we saw it took a lot of painstaking years, blood, sweat, and tears, lots of difficult games to watch to lead up to that moment. So I think for a lot of Pistons fans, that's going to be their favorite game of their fanhood, and they have every right to feel that way.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. And even just kind of going back, what you said about those, 2016, 2019 teams, as fun as they were, you also knew that the final product, as far as the max potential, the ceiling of those rosters, was what you were watching, right? Of stumbling into the playoff with that 8 seed. That's really kind of as far as you knew that team could go. Was a first round team, but with this team, sky's the limit. One, sky's the limit for this year. We're playing with house money, but what's next year going to look like, Sean? What is this team capable with a couple of maybe small tweaks over the offseason, better development with our younger guys, another year under their belt? What's next season going to look like? What's the year after that going to look like? So I think for me, Sean, just seeing how much they've been able to prove, of course, last year to this year, no NBA team has ever tripled their win total, but I'm looking forward to seasons to come, Sean. This is the first year that Cade Cunningham has taken this team to the playoffs, the first year of this era. This era could last us 6, 7 years, 8 years. So, it's going to be really fun to see how this is going to all plan out in years to come. We're here, Sean. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the most exciting things is that we're not going to be a lottery team next year, right?
Yeah, let's not be let's not measure out where we're going to be putting the banners just yet, but I think for if you are a Pistons fan, the thing that is exciting again, like you said, is this is something that does have the potential to be in the playoff mix or perhaps even contention for the next 5, 6, 7+ years if all things go well and they continue to support this roster. And the big thing is now going into next year, this team is going to have expectations, and we are going to be looking at this team differently. And so is the rest of the league. Well, Troy, that leans really well into, kind of like the next conversation and next piece of this as far as the Pistons recognition and where they're at, because the Athletic, they did their yearly annual survey with anonymous NBA players, and essentially like 100 plus players answered this poll, and they ask multiple questions like who do they think's the MVP, who do they think's the best team in the league, like besides their own, or worst team in the league besides their own, all those types of things. The Pistons have normally been listed as one of the worst teams in the league in this survey. They are not even listed in that conversation as as someone that's even there. So that's something as far as like a sign of progress is that the players are starting to recognize and respect what they have building. There was the question of 5 years from now, who's going to be the face of the league. The overwhelming majority answered Victor Wembanyama at 54.3%, but Cade Cunningham was listed at 2.2%, along with guys like Paolo Banchero, John Morant, and then Luca was at 2.9%. So the fact he's in that conversation, which is a pretty elite group of players. But then this is where it gets really interesting. They asked who's the most overrated and who's the most underrated players in the NBA. The most overrated at 14.4%, Tyrese Halliburton. Number 2, Rudy Gobert at 10%. Number 3, Trae Young at 8.9%. So more people said that Tyrese Halliburton was overrated than Trae Young. Thought that was interesting. Most underrated player in the NBA, number 1, Cade Cunningham. Number 2, Derek White. Number 3, Norman Powell. So the players have spoken, and the players have stated that Cade Cunningham's pretty legit. And another thing to note is that after the whole Luka debacle, the Mavericks now have been listed as one of the organizations listed as one of the worst organizations in the league, voted on by the players. The number one is Charlotte Hornets by 38.1%. The closest is the Wizards at 20.4%, followed by the Pelicans, the Kings, the Sixers, the Mavericks, the Bulls, the Knicks, the Grizzlies, and the Jazz. So thought that was interesting. But Troy, just to show like the players recognize what's happening in Detroit. And for years, we've been talking about how to get themselves out of that hole in those surveys, how to get respect throughout the league. And it seems like players really respect what Cade Cunningham's got going on.
Right, you're absolutely right, Sean. And I think with that, the first thing I think of is his consistency. Right, I mean, Cade has played great games against really all 29 rest of the other teams in the league, and teams notice that. Teams have a scouting report, and I think with Cade, the consistency has been there all season long. The winning has been there all season long. And yeah, I mean, he was an all-star, but I don't think quite as far as the league is concerned, he's still having, he's up there with a Ja or an SGA or a Luca or some of those things. But the players have noticed him. The players have noticed Cade of this year and Cade of last year. And Cade of last year was great too. But they're seeing how he's had his impact and his fingerprints on winning. And that fingerprints on winning, I think, goes a long way of what people notice. You wanna get noticed in this league, win some basketball games, and be the reason why your team is winning those games.
Yeah. I think it's important to note that this survey, I believe, was conducted close to the All-Star break around February. And that's when guys like Tyrese were kind of struggling. Cade was kind of under the radar performing. Now, obviously, I think the league is very much recognized, what's going on with Cade in Detroit. And I think, like you said, if you want to get that spotlight and to be recognized, it's to win. It's to win at the highest levels. And I think the thing that really stood out to me about the first two games for the Pistons in the playoffs is obviously you saw game one, those early jitters and those struggles that they had, but it's how quickly they responded and were able to turn that around and improve. Cade obviously in game one, only finished with I think he had like 20 points, but in the first half, he was, pretty limited, was kind of, letting the game go on and just kind of observing and taking things in. And then game two, he just came out and he was on the attack. He finished with 33 points on 11 to 21 shooting, 12 rebounds, only 3 assists. But that's because not a lot of guys outside of Cade really even had their offense going. I mean, Dennis Schroeder was awesome. He had 20 points and, I think should probably have free beer for life in Detroit with some of the shots he hit and getting the Pistons playoff drought broken there. And then on top of that, I think that perhaps the MVP of the series thus far for the Pistons has to be Tobias Harris. I mean, the level he's been playing on both sides of the court, he did it with his offense in game one and then did it with his defense in game two. Held Carl Anthony Towns scoreless in the second half. So for a guy who really, this time last year, Troy was being slandered, was being dug and really blamed for a lot of the issues in Philly, was essentially being treated as a cancer that they needed to remove from that locker room. And now he's in Detroit and he just came back to an organization that was he was part of that playoff drought and came
Right.
back and helped and broke it. And now his old team is in the lottery looking for the ping pong balls to bounce their way. And Detroit could potentially push for a second round series with the Boston Celtics.
Right, right. And I cannot tell you how much he has had his fingerprints on this team all season long. I mean, all season long, he's been there. He's been able to provide great scoring, great veteran leadership, great defensive, shutdowns, and, just aggressive on the defensive end. I think that's something I noticed yesterday, too. I mean, he was grabbing all the rebounds. He was just locked in on both sides of the court. When we needed a bucket, he was there. And that just speaks big volumes to who Tobias Harris has been this season and really what he's been throughout his career, not just on the Pistons, but other teams as well. He's a guy that's going to give it his all. He's going to impact both sides of the court. And you're right. I don't think the Pistons are quite in the position that they are without the ability that he's been bringing to this team all season long.
Yeah, no question. And obviously his playoff performances in particular have really been under scrutiny, but I think there's something to be said of about a guy who's respected both on and off the court by this team, this organization, and this fan base. And I think there's something to be said about being comfortable and thriving in that type of environment. Whereas when you're only in an environment that fosters and just breeds negativity,
Mhm.
you're going to see that impact on the court too, right?
Right.
So just really happy for Tobias. I think the other thing that you saw as well is just the importance of guys being able to come in and step up when needed. Specifically, guys like Paul Reed, who it was not in the rotation throughout most of the season. He's a guy they got off waivers in the offseason as like a solid third big to have on their roster. But just because they have a guy like Isaiah Stewart to bring off the bench, they didn't really have to call on Paul Reed very often. But for him to come in and to play the level defensively that he did, even though like he had some passes that were a little bit rough, he kind of had a turnover on a fast break opportunity, that could have pushed their lead out even further. And there were some moments where it was a little rough. I thought for the 11 minutes that Paul Reed played, those 11 minutes were huge. Not only were Detroit up in those minutes, he had a plus 13 on the game, which is the highest of the team. They were able to excel while Jalen Duren was off the court and resting, which was absolutely huge because that meant Jalen Duren was able to, stay out of foul trouble and actually have the energy to get through the game and help Detroit get through this win. And he played pretty darn well too.
Right, right, right. No, going to Paul Reed, I mean, he knew his role last night, right? I mean, and he excelled at that role. And you mentioned the defense, but he got in the right spots on the offensive end too, and he was
Mhm.
able to catch passes, right under the basket, lay it in, score for us. And those were some valuable points he put in during the course of the game yesterday. So I think not only was he locked in the defensive end, that shot over Carl Anthony Towns, that block was
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
But I guess, I'm looking at the offensive end, and he knew where to be. And
Mhm.
he knew exactly what his team needed him on the court last night. And even just the very, very little bit we saw, like even of like Ron Holland, he guarded well too yesterday. But of course, Reed had a little more minutes, and of course, probably a more noticeable impact. But
Mhm.
it's just that we have guys, Sean. We have a bench that knows their role and wants to be a part of it and wants to contribute to winning in any way that they can. And I
Yep.
give credit to the coaching staff because not every team has those types of bench players that can impact and to go into games during any specific moment, especially in a hostile Madison Square Garden, and perform like that. So Paul Reed, he's a pro's pro.
Yeah, without a doubt. The Pistons in the fourth quarter in game 1, they had that collapse where they allowed the 21-0 run from the Knicks to ultimately allow them back into that one. And it looked like for a little bit the Pistons were going to go on a bit of a rut in the fourth quarter as well. But the things that kind of ultimately prevented that from happening were a combination of guys like Cade Cunningham and Dennis Schroeder getting to the free throw line. But on top of that, it was the big shot making from a Dennis Schroeder specifically when New York would come down the court and they hit some big threes. Almost immediately, Dennis Schroeder gets the ball, takes a three in stride, no hesitation, hits the shot when Detroit really needed it. Was 2 of 3 from beyond the arc in the fourth quarter for Dennis Schroeder, who for my money, like is one of the more underrated quality starters that we have in this league. He's one of the only players I've seen been traded multiple times because he's helping his teams win too much.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Like he was traded for Brooklyn because it's like, I don't know, we don't really want to win this much. And then he goes to Golden State, and it's like, all right, well, we can go get Jimmy Butler, so we're gonna do that. But you're like what we like no hard feelings, and people just thought he was used goods because of that. But for him to come in and play the quality of minutes that he has is always like you're never gonna get like this incredible like 30 plus point game out of Dennis Schroeder, but he always gives you a consistent 10, 15, 20 points a night. And then on top of that, he's such a stable playmaker and presence, and he's pretty underrated on the defensive end. He was really good at sticking with Jalen Brunson in the full court and making him uncomfortable. Like Brunson was still scoring, but he made him work his ass off for it.
Right, right, right. And man, he's been playing like this really his whole his whole career in the league, Sean. And basketball is a hard sport to be consistent in each and every night, especially when we're talking about an 82 game season. Especially when you're talking about having a guy that can contribute to the winning, right? Of not necessarily the leading scorer every game, but helping his team become better and win games. It's hard to do that in any level of basketball, let alone the highest level of the NBA. So yeah, I mean Dennis Schroeder. Shout out to Trajan Langdon for realizing that this is a guy that we need to bring into this roster, and shout out to JB Bickerstaff for integrating him so well. I think Dennis Schroeder, as far as a minutes standpoint is concerned, he's giving us the exact amount that I think is helping our team win. Right? I mean, he's not out there 40 minutes a night, but he's out there a perfect amount, that 25, minute area where it's affecting our team. And certainly last night, I don't know if we win last night without Dennis Schroeder, especially because of the shot he made, with 1 minute to go. But Sean, all season that we've since the deadline when we brought him in, from the rest of the season now into the first two games of the playoffs, he's been a stud. And if we win another game in this series, especially if we push it to maybe even a game seven, I think Dennis Schroeder's hands are going to be a lot into why.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, Detroit as a team went 6 of 27 from beyond the arc that night. 3 of those threes were from Dennis Schroeder, 2 of them were in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, right.
So, like, that was just not really something that was part of their arsenal that night. So
Mhm.
for him to be able to have the confidence to come into his 3rd team of the year in the playoffs and take those shots and make them, just all the credit in the world to Dennis Schroeder. Just all the credit in the world. I thought played really well. And I'm not too worried about like I know Tim Hardaway Jr. It's kind of like we kind of had the THJ experience in the first two games of the playoffs thus far. For game 1, he has 18 points. It's like, "Oh, this guy's awesome." Like he's playing incredible basketball. And then in game 2, he has 0 points and you're like, "Wait, Tim's on the court?"
Yeah, yeah,
And Malik, I think Malik his struggles, I think a lot of that was actually stemmed from some of the adjustments that was made from the Knicks. Specifically, they really had Mikal Bridges kind of trailing and on Malik Beasley for a lot of that game. And like Malik was still having opportunities, at points for open shots, but a lot of the shots that he caught in rhythm, his window for release was a lot quicker than it usually is. And
mhm,
even though Malik's like a elite shooter and, has great form, great release, really consistent release point and all of those different things, Mikal Bridges is one of the best defenders in the league for a reason. His length is something that's going to, at the very least, affect the way that you shoot the ball. So, I wasn't really wasn't really too surprised given how they were defending them. Did you see that too, Troy?
yeah. No, I definitely saw that. And shooting at the high volume that he has all year, just having to adjust so slightly to get that release off quicker, because he knows Mikal Bridges is right there with his hand in his face. Just that slight change is gonna affect the shot if you like it or not. And I think now that we have the game, of course, on Saturday night, that only gave less than 48 hours to prepare for this game. I think just with this one extra day between yesterday and Thursday, now, I think Malik is going to be able to talk with the coaching staff more and set up a game plan for how he's able to still get his consistent form off and hopefully hit a few in Mikal's face during Game 3 and Game 4 as well. So I noticed that absolutely, Sean, but I don't think it's going to be a huge factor going into the rest of the playoffs.
Yeah, I think as they get to Detroit, generally speaking, especially in the playoffs, you shoot a lot better at home.
Absolutely.
So I expect them to, only see, that improve as the series goes on. I think the other thing as well is, and just kind of like the last thing on, just like things I saw in game 2, but Cade was awesome as the game went on. He was like his 3rd quarter in particular, 2nd quarter was when he really took over and when he really shined. I think he was decently aggressive in that 4th quarter, but I think those are really the moments where you need to lean on your franchise player. and he needs to take over more and take the ball in his hands, it's great that you have a guy like a Dennis Schroeder who has the confidence that he does and can take the ball and hit big shots when he has openings, and when the opportunity doesn't present itself for a guy like Cade. And let's be clear, they've been throwing a lot of bodies at Cade, and a lot of those bodies happen to be some of the best defenders in basketball. And OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges will collapse in the paint on Cade when he gets into the basket. Cat or Mitchell Robinson, whoever's playing the five, will come up to him as well. So he is getting met with a lot of bodies, a lot of physicality. So I do not want to minimize how difficult they're making this series for him. Having said that, that's kind of the unfair burden that's put on a franchise, player who's seen as a potential face of the league superstar quality player, right? And
Right.
that's the thing. It feels like nitpicking because they won the game. He had 32, 33 points, but like it really isn't. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and that's just, I mean, they're going to throw every, defensive scheme and adjustment, throughout the series to stop him, from scoring points. But Sean, he showed that he is the franchise player and that he's the true reason that the Pistons were able to turn around so much this season. I mean, for his second playoff game ever to come into the Garden and play like he did. Now, I know Knicks fans were saying, well, look at Jalen Brunson. He scored more points and had more assists. But Sean, one, Cade's younger, and two, the Knicks still have weapons like a Cat and a Mikal Bridges that I guess Cade doesn't have in the fullness effect. Now, yes, he has Jalen Duren. Yes, he has shooters. Yes, it's far better than last year and the year before. But I thought Cade's fingerprints were on the game even more so than Brunson yesterday. So
Yeah, for sure. And I think again, when you kind of look at the story of this game, you look at some of the defensive statistics, and the things that are really impressive is like Tobias Harris. He held his in the 17 defensive minutes he played. He held his opponents to 16% field goal percentage.
wow,
16%.
wow,
Um, Asar Thompson in his 8 minutes and 45 seconds. Granted, he had a lot of fouls, but the reason why Jalen Brunson was holding up the six when Asar was out and was as happy as he was because he was holding opponents to 37% from the field in that game. Like, if you want to talk about like the true star of the show, the Pistons defense was showing up and showing out. Cade Cunningham kept his opponents 43% from the field.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we just limited their abilities to score, and just seeing how fierce and competitive they were on the defensive end. They were locked in. Even some of the plays that the Knicks scored, Sean, yesterday, they were
Yep.
still locked in. And there was just a couple of plays where they definitely had a broke down defense. The Knicks just outsmarted them a few plays, but you could tell that they were going to make it as difficult as possible for the Knicks to score. And what was even
Mhm.
the score at halftime? Is how much points did the Knicks score at halftime? Was it 41 or 42? I mean, it was a pretty low amount for what the Knicks have been putting up all season long at halftime.
Yeah, the Knicks had 49 in the first
49.
half,
Okay.
and they
Okay.
had 18 in that first quarter.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for the Pistons to hold a team under 20 points
Hmm.
in 2025, let alone in the postseason,
Yeah.
is really impressive. I think the other thing it tells the story as well. We've been talking quite a bit about how, like if the Pistons are to win this series, they need to exploit their matchups and find those advantages. And again, if you look at the statistics, Karl Anthony Towns' defensive field goal percentage was 70%.
Wow. Wow.
Josh Hart, his was 55%. Deuce McBride, 60%. And the Pistons had some of those guys as well. Tim had a rough game defensively. But overall, like if you look statistically, like and you just look at the way that they're playing too, they were clearly attacking Cat in the pick and roll, getting Tim in the paint. And they made it a priority to try and make those guys uncomfortable. I think the biggest thing too is they were running. They were fast. They were making the Knicks play on their back foot. And you could see by the end of the game, New York looked tired as hell.
Yeah, and especially that first half, Sean, we weren't letting them get to the line. And I think in the NBA, that is a strategy. You want to get to the line; those are free points. Those are free points at the line to make. And the fact that we weren't fouling on the defensive end, we were truly playing hard, competitive, scrappy defense without fouling. That's gonna help your chances of winning go up exponentially. So I think that's another point to point out about last night's game in the first half.
Yeah, most definitely. Overall, I think if you're the Pistons, I think you have to feel thrilled about where you're at in this series. I think if you're the Knicks, I think you still feel good. You still have reasons to be optimistic, but at the same time, I'm feeling a little nervous about having to going into Detroit tied in this series, losing that home court advantage we earned in the season, and now you're really going to have to play your best basketball, make sure guys are really on it, and you're already starting to see the series start to kind of have the effect on both teams. Obviously, Isaiah Stewart, excuse me, was kind of hobbled in game one and missed game two. And on the Knicks side, you could really again just see that fatigue as the game went on, and the Knicks looked exhausted by the end of it. So Jalen Brunson just got back from injury a couple weeks ago. He played 44 of the 48 minutes.
That might be a big factor in game five, and if there's a game six.
Yep, most definitely. So I think that, and not even just because of the bias that is clearly here, but I think this has been the best series, along with the Clippers Nuggets series thus far in the postseason. I think this has been as even of a matchup as you could possibly ask for. I think if you're the Pistons, you're thrilled about that. If you're the Knicks, that kind of bums you out because you just traded a lot of first round picks to be as good as, no disrespect to the Pistons, a team that was was won 14 games a year ago. I think if you told the Knicks that, they would not be thrilled.
Right, right, right. And I think with that, the biggest thing is that the Knicks are competing to win it all. They at least how this roster is constructed, they want to beat a Boston or a Cleveland in rounds to come. And the fact that they're right here right now, tied 1-1. You're right. I think that's certainly underperforming as far as their expectations. But you mentioned the Nuggets series. I think that's another great one because the series is tied at 1-1, Sean, but it easily could be 2-0 Denver, but it also easily could have been 2-0 Clippers, of how game one ended for them and how game two ended for the Nuggets. So that's one where it's truly, I think, anyone's series still. We knew when it was 0-0 before game one, it was anyone's series, but that series is especially anyone's up for grabs right now.
Yeah, most definitely. It's going to be a really fun series to watch. I'm excited to see how game 3 develops and, game 4 and beyond. Now that the series is going to be in Detroit, it's going to be absolutely electric. Excited to see how the fans how the fans react and respond, and just to see, just LCA bumping once again with playoff basketball. It's a great sight to see, man. And absolutely excited for it. Troy, we have a lot of other series and other playoff basketball to talk about because it is that time of year. But there's also been a lot of other things to discuss in the NBA circles, specifically Nico Harrison of the Dallas Mavericks, the general manager that traded away Luka Doncic. He keeps opening his mouth, Troy. It is a gift of his to continue to have a dumber and dumber quote about this trade every single time he gets the opportunity to speak on it. And reportedly, a couple weeks ago, the press conference that was held by the Mavericks and Nico, or last week, I should say now, before the play-in tournament, that was the reason that was held is because that was something that was forced from Patrick Dumont and ownership because they are not happy with the PR and the way in which things are being handled with the Mavericks right now. That press conference did not exactly help. So now you have end of season, you have end of season press conferences, and you had questions such as Isaac Harris of Locked On Mavericks asking Nico point and blank why he shouldn't be fired. And you also had Nico Harrison openly admitting that he did not know. This is the direct quote. I want to make sure I am reading this exactly. This is the direct quote. I didn't quite know what level Luca meant to this fan base, which is either the most damning thing a general manager could ever say about any franchise in the sport, because it's pretty obvious how much Luca meant to Dallas. I mean, Troy, you and I have been watching the NBA for a long time. Have seen the Mavericks for a long time. I've never been to Dallas, and I can tell you their whole franchise is about loyalty to their guy,
Does
to
he
their
also
star.
know that he took that team literally, oh, I don't know, 10 months ago to the NBA Finals? Like, you don't think that that made a connection even stronger between a franchise player and the fans?
And it's like, did you not see the Dirk literally passing the torch to Luca in the season where it was essentially like big and little brother, and how much that meant to the city of Dallas?
Yeah.
And and there's all these reports that are coming out about how he fired the like, like the some of the most respected people in the organization on the medical team, which were also some of Dirk Nowitzki's best friends, some of Luca's most beloved people in the organization, uh fired because Nico wanted to have Nico's guys. And one of the guys that Nico brought in isn't doesn't even have the proper certifications to be an athletic trainer in the NBA, but was hired under the expectation that he would get those certifications this summer. So you go from having one of the most well-regarded, well-respected, highest performing medical staffs in the NBA to having a staff that reportedly was also getting in fights with each other and bickering and yelling at each other throughout the facility over some of these medical decisions. And they don't even respect each other. It's just all you hear about the Mavericks now is just the complete dysfunction. And if you want to see the source of it, man, just watch Nico Harrison talk for 5 minutes, because it is clear that he is an intelligent man, that he knows like he knows principles and fundamental concepts of basketball. But when it comes to running a franchise, working with human beings, having a logical brain that does logical things, that is not Nico Harrison's forte. And clearly, Mark Cuban and whoever else was part of that front office before this whole sale of the Dallas Mavericks was covering up a lot of that. I'm not sure how much of this press conference you saw, Troy, or the clips or the quotes that came out, but Troy, it just feels like it's only getting worse every time he opens his mouth. And the only thing that I can think of that even begins this healing journey for Dallas, other than somehow miraculously winning the draft lottery, which I think would just get all the fans in the NBA, their conspiracy theory hats would just go off the charts. The only other thing I can think of that would cure this franchise is if they fire Nico Harrison. That is legitimately the only thing, because at least at that point they can start to move on.
Yeah, that probably has to be, if you're talking about logical steps, the next step. But Sean, one thing we haven't talked about much in the podcast is what happened a week and a half ago, almost 2 weeks ago now, when Luca returned to Dallas and put on the show that he did. And in the last 2 minutes of the game, we're chanting the fire Nico, because I think that showed a lot too of all the concerns that the Mavericks said that they had with Luca, from his weight to his work ethic to his talent
Conditioning.
being not worth giving him the bag this summer of the supermax extension. All that went out the bag when you drop almost 50 against that team who's fighting for a play-in spot, and eventually did get it with that 10 seeds. But man, total dysfunction, but total backfire. And I think the most ironic thing about this is that when this trade went down in the day or two afterwards, one, everyone and their brother knew that the Lakers won the trade and that the Mavs absolutely did not win the trade with pissing away their franchise player. But also, Nico said that one quote of, maybe I'm going to be burying myself, my own grave. And not even 3 months later, he is burying his own grave.
Yeah. Well, and then you talk about the fact that this is the last year for the next 4 years that they control their own draft capital. So even if this all flames out, the reason why this is historically bad is because you have no alternative. You have no safety net. Like, even if you trade Anthony Davis and get a lieu of picks in return, that doesn't give you the incentive to tank. You're not going to
Right,
be able to have control of where those picks land
right,
because your picks
right.
are gone. They're
Hmm.
out throughout the league
Right,
because you made trades thinking that you were going to have Luka Doncic for the next decade plus. And
right,
all of a sudden, this guy goes up to ownership and has a change of plans, and the owner doesn't know what the hell's going on. He's just some gambling doofus who's like, "Yeah, sure, Nico. Sounds great, Nico." And now the reports are coming out that he's upset because he didn't expect all this backlash and is mad that Nico didn't warn him.
right.
It's like, have you not walked the concourse of your own arena?
Right, but I think the big thing, which this proves, we talk about lessons being learned about all of this, is you got to have basketball minds in those positions. Like
Yeah.
money is important in this league. The league is a business. You got to have some financial incentive here, to run organizations. You have to be, good money making, people. But you have to have a basketball head in all of
Yeah.
this too. But you would think that even if you have a small basketball brain, you would recognize the talent of a Luka Doncic,
Well,
but I guess not.
well, you need to have a basketball brain, but you also need checks and balances because that's the true problem here, Troy, is it's not just the fact that Nico Harrison decided one day that he wanted to trade Luka Doncic. It's clear that there are a lot of people in the organization, including Jason Kidd, by the way, who you remember when he randomly sat out of a or randomly skipped a press conference?
Mhm.
That was apparently to send a message internally that about his feelings about the trade. So uh, so you had a lot of people in that organization who did not agree with the moves that were made. And you didn't have the proper checks and balances because when the owner of the Mavericks, Mark Cuban, the old owner, I should say, was ousted from the front office, this executive, Nico Harrison, who was known for, oh, well, he made the Kyrie Irving trade. Oh, well, he made the PJ Washington trade. Oh, well, he tanked and they got Derek Lively. Surely he's really smart. Well, you know who also made those trades and those moves look really good? Luka Doncic, when he played with those guys
Yeah,
and
yeah.
put them in positions to shine and do
Mhm.
really damn well. You know who didn't look very good when they played in their playing game? The Dallas Mavericks. Their first game against the Kings, sure, they came out, they beat an inferior Kings team with a size struggling Demontis Sabonis going up against Anthony Davis and just seeing the clear mismatch there. Great. You then got blown out by a Memphis Grizzlies team who went on to have the worst loss in a game one in NBA playoffs history. What the hell does that say about you?
It
But
says a
no,
lot,
but he's
Sean.
promising
Yeah,
next
yeah,
year, Troy, they're going to be a championship level basketball
yeah.
team.
And how many
Off of what?
And another guy too we haven't mentioned once in this shabacle is a guy that played okay in both games, but you saw the health struggles. You saw him limping off the court. Anthony Davis. You really think Anthony Davis is going to be the franchise player that takes this team in a Western Conference Finals with how deep the West is getting, and not only take that team to the Western Conference Finals, but win the Western Conference Finals and go to the NBA Finals? I don't see this current roster like even in the slightest with Anthony Davis's health being the deciding factor that you're putting all your chips in to
Yep.
work. Be the very thing that takes you to the promised land. So that is going to be something to keep our eye on is Anthony Davis's health next year. But you know, how many of 82 games do you think he's going to play next year? I mean, 60 would be, I feel like, even highballing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony Davis, if you expect if you expect him to play anything anything around 70 games, I think you're being optimistic. You know, I just he's a guy throughout his career that yes, he's been more healthy over the last couple of seasons with the Lakers, but we also know that the Lakers have had a much better medical staff
Yeah,
and have much higher class resources available to them. Now, with this current debacle in Dallas, I can't expect him to be back to his healthier years. I mean, shoot, he played 51 games this year. He missed 31 games.
yeah, right.
And and the majority and unfortunately for Dallas, the vast majority of those missed games came in a Mavericks uniform.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, but no, you made the trade because defense wins championships because you needed a guy who you could rely to be on the court. And so to do that, you went and got a guy who every other year is the total heads and tails of his games played.
Right, right, and I mean the biggest thing that I'm still scratching my head. Everything that we've talked about, makes me scratch my head with this trade. But we haven't talked much about the fact that this trade went between two people's conversation, meaning that if the Mavericks truly wanted to move away from Luca, they didn't open that up to the rest of the league to get a better offer. I mean, if the Mavericks organization made it known to the league that Luca's available, they could have taken advantage of another team. They really could have with draft capital and everything. They could have, but it was either we keep Luca or we make this deal with the Lakers for Anthony Davis. I mean, there that to me, Sean, I think there's so many factors of why this is a bad trade, but that right there of you have the incentive. You are on offense when you say that a player like Luca is available. Again, you can manipulate other teams to put in more picks, more role players, and exploit them for that. But then
Yep.
you got exploited because you didn't think through even remotely of the damage that this is going to do for your organization for years to come.
Yeah, most definitely. Troy, I think everything there really well said. I think the biggest thing that the Mavericks have as far as a hurdle going forward with them is they're going to have to work really damn hard to repair that relationship with the Dallas Mavericks fans. And I think unfortunately for them, I don't think it's as simple as just winning. I think for a lot of fans, winning a championship without Luka Doncic would feel pretty empty. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And the good news for those fans is they won't have to worry about winning a championship without Luka Doncic because it's going to be a long time before this team is even relevant again, thanks to some of the terrible moves and the repercussions that will be facing them for years to come. Now, Troy, let's talk about teams that are going to be in that race and are in that race right now. Specifically, let's kind of go through some of the other series throughout the league, touch on some of the most interesting ones. Let's get the lesser ones out of the way real quick. Oklahoma City looked incredible. 51-point win over the Grizzlies. If you're Memphis, how do you not blow everything up going into this offseason? That's my question.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, you have some pieces there that are movable, but yeah, as far as the current status quo of Memphis, yeah, I mean they lost that first playoff game or so that play-in game, and they squeaked by in that second to be the eighth seed. But they were a team that had some good stretches in the regular season. I mean, they hovered around, I think, even for the fourth seed for a good chunk of the year. But yeah, they just don't have that complete roster to compete in the West anymore. So you're right. A team like Memphis, I think, would benefit a lot from blowing up and seeing how valuable some of their pieces are, in the trade market, and maybe even see if you can bring in a free agent or two. But yeah, this current status. Team or the status quo for this roster right now, it can't compete. And seeing how the Thunder exploited them in game one is all the evidence in the world you need to prove that point.
4 years ago, John Morant went on NBA Today and said we're fine in the West.
Yeah,
Four
not
years later, he was down by as much as 60 to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and was found on the bench when they were down by 40 or 50 points at multiple points laughing,
yeah.
which we've seen before from Ja Morant. So, quite frankly, man, people make a big deal out of the gun stuff and out of, the way he carries himself on social media, all those different things. I couldn't care less what celebration he does. I couldn't care less about all of those things. If I find you to be that disconnected from the result, or if I have to really question how much you care, I can't have you as my franchise guy. And if I'm the Memphis Grizzlies, even though Ja talks a big act and at times puts on these incredible performances that makes you believe he really cares about the game and about the team and about what's going on, he also puts a lot of distractions out there that deters away from the team in the game in actually winning basketball. The conversation about John Moran hasn't been winning in months. It's been, what the hell is he doing?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, no, and that you're right. That's not just this year's story, but it seems like in years past story too. And it's just amazing that window. I'm still thinking about how you started this segment, Sean, of looking at that quote 4 years ago of that we're fine in the West, and to be an ace seed that loses by 60 at one point in a game one. It's just how out of touch can you be? But also how quickly in this league is there another team right behind you ready to move up?
Yeah,
How
you can.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say you can feel as on top of the world as you want,
Right,
but
right, right.
there could be some French freak from France who is 7'5" that could come in at any notice and completely turn your league upside down.
Right, and just look at the Denver Nuggets as a perfect example of that. Winning a championship, losing a couple of pieces. Your second option and Jamal Murray just hasn't looked quite himself of that 2023 season, and now you're in a fourth seed who very well easily could get out in the first round. So, especially in that Western Conference, Sean, there's teams that are getting better and better every year, and because of that, naturally, there's teams that are digressing, and the Memphis Grizzlies are a perfect example of that. Even with
Yeah,
guys like Edie and some of the younger players that they have, they're still
yeah.
more so on the degression. They're more on the down than the up.
Regression.
Regression, you got it.
Yep. I think, yeah, I think to your point, Memphis just there's a lot of reasons to not necessarily feel optimistic about where you're heading because the landscape of the league can flip overnight, and it's pretty clear that it is not flipped in the fortune of the Memphis Grizzlies. They are very much not fine in the West going forward, especially if they just keep with the status quo.
Mhm.
Another team who brought up the Denver Nuggets. That Clippers series it's probably up there with the Pistons. Been the best basketball we've seen this postseason thus far. The Clippers have been the better series for the majority. Have been the better team for the majority of the series, in my opinion. Kawhi Leonard was awesome last night. That win for LA. And I think the big thing that you're noticing here too, Troy, game one, Denver was kind of able to overcome some of their shortcomings and kind of pull out that victory. But I think the big thing you're going to see really tilt in LA's favor as the series goes on. I said this, I tweeted this over the weekend. For Denver to fire their coach 3 games before the postseason and to force a rookie interim coach to go up not just against Tyronn Lue, who for my money, is probably the best coach, if not top 3 in the NBA today. He also has Jeff Van Gundy as his lead assistant, who, if he was an NBA coach for his own team, would be top 5, top 10 today. So
Yeah,
you have your rookie coach going up against not one, but essentially 2 head coaches. Because I know he's just one of their assistants, but that is one of the brightest basketball minds we have in coaching. Do you really think it's a coincidence that he comes in, even with what goes out, and they've been this good?
right. You're telling me coaching doesn't matter. No, absolutely, coaching does matter, and they also have good pieces. And I think with coaching, you want to utilize some of those pieces you have. And a guy that was in that underrated player voting is Norman Powell. I mean, he
I love
hit
Norman
some
Powell.
big shots yesterday, but also some of their offense. I haven't seen Kawhi play like he did in game two, like he did in a while.
Dude,
So really to put the ball in his hands and to design schemes that will help and utilize him to score the basketball. That starts with your coaching staff, Sean.
I'm not going to lie, Troy, going into this season, I was fully out on Kawhi Leonard. And Kawhi has been one of my favorite players in the history of the league when he's in his prime. The 2019 Kawhi Toronto run
Yeah.
is going to be one of the all-time playoff runs for me forever. Just to be able to go into a team traded at the beginning of the season, go in essentially as a mercenary, win that franchise a title, and then leave.
Be
Just to,
a rental
yeah,
player,
just,
right?
just be the best player in the world for 3 months and then peace out. Like, yeah, that's a fair trade. I think that worked out. But like for Kawhi, for him to go through all of these injury struggles, which I know people have given Kawhi a pretty hard time, but the Clippers clearly have been patient with him and his medical team. And for Kawhi to be able to play 39 minutes, put up 39 points, 15 of 19 from the field, and play to that level, to get that Kawhi Leonard in 2025, after all the games he's missed, after all the turmoil he's gone through, all the injuries, all the times where we've gone, where's Kawhi Leonard? Or what's that Kawhi Leonard? Now we're saying, wait, that's Kawhi Leonard. And if you're a team in the Western Conference, if you're like Oklahoma City Thunder, you have to suddenly feel a lot less confident about your chances. Not saying that the Clippers are the favorites, but they are by no means a team to snarl at, especially if they get out of this series against Denver.
Yeah, yeah. You're right with looking at the Clippers in the past couple of years, and not quite sure what Kawhi you're gonna get. But it's gonna be interesting because I do think the West is as deep as it ever been, and the road is still very much uphill for the Clippers, and I think that's the point I want to make with that. Of as good as Kawhi is, I need to see it again.
For
and
sure.
I still think this is going to be an up-road battle for the Clippers. Not counting them out, but I may be not as extremely optimistic maybe as you are with them.
Well, their biggest hurdle would be that if they win this series, they'd have to face the Thunder in round two.
Mhm.
That's their biggest hurdle. But if I'm the Clippers, that's the last team, or if I'm the Thunder, that's the last team I want to match up with, especially in the second round, because that means that there's a higher likelihood that Kawhi's legs are still fresh, that he's still available for that series. And if you got a healthy Kawhi Leonard and James Harden going against those young cats in OKC, OKC's absolutely still the favorites, and they showed why again in that 50+ point bludgeoning against the Grizzlies. But I wouldn't feel good about it going into it. I wouldn't feel comfortable by any means if I'm a Thunder fan, even with my team almost winning 70 games.
Yeah, yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fun series if Clippers can beat Denver.
And speaking on Luka Doncic, Troy, I think Luka and the Lakers might be in trouble against the Minnesota Timberwolves,
Definitely.
right, as presently constructed. The Wolves won their game one matchup in Los Angeles after the Pistons lost their 21-0 run. I'm not gonna lie, Troy, did not watch much of this game because was a little pissed at how that
Yeah,
Pistons game ended.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the Wolves came out and absolutely dominated this one. I think the biggest thing that you could tell in this series, and my biggest reason why I liked Minnesota in this series, was despite the fact that the Lakers have two of the three best players in this series, the Timberwolves have the better constructed team for this series. And granted, the Wolves went 21 of 41 from three, or 21 of 42 from three, I should say. Jaden McDaniels had 25 points. Uh, Naz Reid had 23 points. I don't know if they're going to shoot that well again all playoffs, let alone all series. But I think a thing that you clearly saw as well is just how much of an impact it had that the Lakers didn't have a big that they could rely on. Jackson Hayes played 8 minutes.
Yeah.
So that means for 40 minutes out of 48, against Rudy Gobert and Naz Reid and company, you don't have a big you trust.
Mhm, mhm.
And if I'm the Lakers in a series against a team in the Minnesota Timberwolves that's as dynamic as they are, but also as long as they are, as big as they are, as versatile as they are, I got to be honest, man. Unless you get perfect games from Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves, you're gonna have a hard time beating that Minnesota team 4 out of 7 times.
Yeah, I watched that game maybe a little more than you did because of right after the Pistons loss, and yeah, although it was hard to focus at times, soaking in that game one loss. I thought that what really impressed me was Naz Reid, the guy that you mentioned, and just his ability to get to the spots and make shots. And the Lakers' defense looked pretty lackadaisical too. It did not look like playoff basketball defense as far as wanting to win. And I thought Minnesota exploited that. I think Minnesota exploited the fact that you mentioned the bigs, but just their defense, even on the perimeter, I thought could have been a lot better on the Lakers' part. Yeah, but a perfect effort from Luka, LeBron, and Austin Reeves is what they need. Now, there's been times this season where we have seen that, so we know that they're capable of doing that. But you're right. The hardest part is okay. We can see them do that with one, maybe twice, maybe even three, but can they do it for 4 games? Game 2 tonight in LA. I think we're going to know a lot more about this series when the horn sounds later tonight as we're recording. So if
Yeah.
Minnesota wins 2-0 and they're heading to Minnesota, yeah, I think it's going to be very difficult for the Lakers to recover if they go down 2-0.
If I'm Rob Pelinka, even though you just got a contract extension, you just went and made the Luka Doncic trade, you're feeling pretty damn comfortable. I do everything in my power to make Naz Reid a Los Angeles Laker this summer
Mm-hmm.
because you throw him alongside Luka and AR and LeBron, that's a team that can contend.
Yeah.
That's a team that can move beyond the first round. I just think this is a really difficult matchup for the Lakers that exploits a lot of the roster issues that were created by the Luka trade that they didn't really fix before the trade deadline. So I think it's if this is the ultimate consequence they face from the Luka trade, I think they'll take it.
Right. Because again, you do have all summer to
Yep.
figure that out, and yeah, to get out in the first round sucks. But it's not the end of the world for their organization. Luca is not approaching retirement years.
Yep. Yep. And then, Troy, there's really only one Eastern Conference series outside of the Pistons one that's interesting. So I want to cover that one real quick.
Yeah.
Cavs Heat is going to be a blowout. Uh, Magic Celtics is probably going to be a blowout as well. Jason Tatum is going to be out for game 2 with a wrist, it looks like. So that could be the one storyline to watch. But Pacers Bucks.
I got 49 minutes to decide if I'm going to game 2 or not.
Oh, Troy, I'm so sorry. We could cut this game short if you're looking to
No, no,
go.
no, no. I'm leaning towards no. So let's keep talking about
Okay.
it.
But Troy, this series has been pretty fascinating from the jump. The Pacers are clearly the better team in game 1. There's some jawing between Dame and Tyrese Halliburton at the end of the game, and it looks like Damian Lillard will in fact play tonight against the Pacers. Do you think the Bucks with the Damian Lillard can overcome this Pacers team, or do you think this Pacers team's just too fast, too deep, and too young and too talented for this Bucks team to overcome? Because to me, it just looked like Giannis was just on an island out there without
Right.
Dame.
Right. No, I think definitely Milwaukee can. It's possible, but I still don't think they will. I think the Pacers have the upper hand. I think because of the pace. Now, if Milwaukee comes in and steals game 2, I might think maybe a little otherwise. But I just think this Pacers team all season long, Sean, has been firing on all cylinders, right? All season long, they have shown that they have a high-powered offense led by, of course, Tyrese Halliburton, but Pascal Siakam too. You texted me, most underrated, one of the more underrated players in the league, and I agree. This guy was an all-star this year when Tyrese failed to be so
Yep.
because of his ability to score the ball on the offensive end. Miles Turner is another guy too that he's had some streaky seasons throughout his past 9 or 10 years in the league. But he's a guy too that you can count on that offensive end. Rick Carlisle, great coach, but I still definitely think this is Indiana's series to win, which leaves a lot of questions with the Milwaukee Bucks going into the offseason with Giannis's future and Dame's future and everything. So I'm still going to go with Pacers, but it is possible that the Bucks could take a game two, which would make things really interesting for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I think a motivated Dame Lillard is a pretty scary sight for the Pacers, even
Mhm.
though Dame is just coming back from an unprecedented blood clot situation. Normally, we don't see guys able to return that quickly, but it
Yeah,
sounds like the main reason why is because of how early they caught it and how aggressive they were with treatment to start. So glad
yeah.
to see that Dame's going to be back, and we know if anyone's able to come out and have those type of vintage performances in the postseason, it's a guy like Dame,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly.
The thing that impressed me the most with the Pacers is you had Tyrese Halliburton, who didn't really have a great shooting performance, still was really good with his playmaking, but a guy who I think is really establishing himself as one of the bright young stars of the future for the Indiana Pacers is Andrew Nemhard.
Mhm.
I love every Andrew Nemhard every time I watch him play. The guy is just insanely smart with his decision making. He's 25 years old. He's 6'4". He's really fast. He's shifty. He's a good shot maker, but he also knows when his shot isn't going and he's willing to get to the basket and get easy shots at the rim. Troy, what do you see from Andrew Nemhard? And do you think he could low key be one of the Pacers' best players going into the future?
Yeah, I've seen all of those things from him, Sean, and even just last season too. A lot of their playoff success against the Knicks series had to do with his ability to score the ball, and I think with him, you see consistency, you just see smart basketball decisions, and most importantly, a guy who knows how to score in the NBA. He can complement his teammates, but also he can know when it's his own to get out and get buckets. And with the streakiness we've seen from Benedict Mathurin even this season, yeah, I think you want to keep a guy like Nimhard around as a potential cornerstone piece for your roster moving forward. I don't know what all that's going to look like. I'm not quite sure when he's up for a contract extension, but he's a guy that has put the Pacers in a position to compete in the playoffs the past two seasons, that last year and this year. So yeah, Sean, I like him a lot too, and I thought this year in particular he's made even some bigger leaps from last year. And last year, that's saying a lot because last year he had a great year as well.
Hmm. Okay, so this is pretty crazy.
Okay.
Andrew Nemhard has the 13th highest salary on the Pacers.
Wow. Yeah, that should not be at
He
all.
he makes less money than guys such as Thomas Bryant, James Johnson, Ben Shepherd, Jarris Walker. He makes 3 times less than Jarris Walker. Just to give perspective, TJ McConnell makes 9.3, Aaron Neesmith makes 11. So you are getting an absolute bargain for Andrew Nemhard as far as what you're paying him. Now, here's the thing. He does have an extension kicking in next year. He will make 18 million, then 19, then 20. So he does have a hefty pretty little payday coming in. But Troy, I'd argue that the Pacers did well in getting that deal done, because I could argue he could already be worth more than that if he keeps playing at this level.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, I mean he's a guy that we say all the time. There's stars and there's stars at his role, and Andrew Nimhard is an absolute stud at his role.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't, you don't, not every team would kill for a Andrew Nimhard, right? With his age, with his versatility, with his ability to score the ball. So yeah, he just makes that Indiana Pacers team even more well-rounded.
It's like, is he an all-star? No. But I could confidently say that he would be an integral or crucial part of just about every rotation in this league.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
he's a guy that you could plug and play in and literally on any team.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's probably the best compliment I can give him. I was really impressed with Nemhard's performance. Now, Troy, want to talk about this series quickly before we wrap up. I know this has been a longer episode than usual, but it is the playoffs, baby, and this is our time of the year. Houston Rockets, Golden State Warriors.
Hmm.
I'll disclose. won a little money on this one. Felt pretty confident that the Warriors were going to win, that they were going to pull this one out, that they were going to be the better team. The Rockets scored a season low 85 points. Alperen Şengün played really well, but ultimately needed a little bit more boost from his guys around him. Troy, I think the big thing that we see here is this Golden State team with Jimmy Butler's legit. And I just think this was a terrible matchup for Houston to get, not just in the sense of the boogeyman that the Warriors have been to that franchise over the course of the last decade plus, but then on top of that, a team that can just clearly exploit all of the weaknesses of Houston. And quite frankly, I don't think you have anybody on that team that can go bucket for bucket with Jimmy or Steph in the clutch, let alone both.
Yeah, which is a little disappointing because we're high on the Rockets, right? We love us, Amen Thompson and the way that Şengün's been playing and Tari Eason, right? But yeah, you're right. When you have a matchup like this of youth versus experience, experience is going to certainly be on the Warriors' side with all of this. Now, going down 1-0, is it possible for the Houston to win, an upset in the game or, win in game two and maybe even get one on the road? Sure it is. I mean, they have proved themselves all season wrong that they know how to win basketball team, that this young core is legit and is willing to play competitive and to stand on their 2 feet every game. But you're right. It's those two guys. It's Steph Curry, okay, and Jimmy Butler, two proven bucket getters for the past decade. We have seen both of these guys make finals runs when everyone was counting them out. And now with the new scenery with Jimmy Butler too, I can't help but to think, he's all locked in and his eyes are on the prize this year of upsetting that Houston Rockets team. So game two, another one, it's going to be really interesting. You talk about the Lakers series, the Clippers series, this Rockets series, and especially this Pacers Bucks series. These are 4 series that I cannot wait to watch game 2 of. Game 2 is going to tell massive stories about where each of those teams are at moving forward. The teams that lost game 1.
Yeah. I mean, Amen Thompson, I thought there were some moments where he played really well. I think you really saw him really shine on the defensive end and, with some of his playmaking. He did have lowest plus minus. There were some moments where he definitely struggled a little bit, but I think overall, I thought there were a lot of things to like from Amen's game.
Mm-hmm.
The big thing that you just saw was, they need more from guys like Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet.
Yeah.
If you were to combine their shot totals, it would be horrendous. Jalen Green was 3 of 15. Fred VanVleet was 4 of 19. VanVleet was 2 of 13 from 3. So, just like the guys that you really need to go out and get buckets for you, that backcourt that was really supposed to kind of be that backcourt of the future for the Rockets just has not been the case. And Green in particular, 7 points on 15 shots, even for your first playoff game, is just pretty rough.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm Ime Udoka, I'm definitely playing around and toying around with as many different combinations as you can, running the offense through a lot of different guys. But I mean, again, this has just been the thing we've been talking about with Houston all year long. As great as guys like Amen Thompson are, as great as of young players as guys like Alperen Şengün are, when you don't have that defined number one or those guys you can clearly go to, like Şengün's clearly showing himself to be the best player of this group. But is he a clear cut number one guy you can contend with going forward? I don't know if I can say that for a matter of fact.
Right. So that leaves us to say their off season too, regardless of how this series turns out, is going to be interesting of can they go identify that number one guy?
Yeah, absolutely it is. I mean, for if you're the Houston Rockets, you're looking around and you're going, okay, what's going on in Milwaukee? What's going on in Phoenix? Like what are the situations I can look at and cash in, because you clearly have talent. You clearly can, if you put the right star in the center of it all, I think you can contend. It's just about making that right move. Mm-hmm. So it'll be fascinating to watch. Troy, it's the best time of the year, man. I'm so excited to see it all develop and go down. Thank you so much for joining. And thank you to those at home for for tuning into the podcast. Be sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you're not missing any of the content that we have coming. Also, be sure you follow me at Sean Halfcourt on X, where you'll find all the playoff coverage, including for Game 3 of Pistons Knicks in person. Troy, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you subscribe.